the 76ers is they tried to play two different things. They tried to play contender, and they tried to play protect Joel Embiid. It wasn't doing Joel Embiid any good. This goes back to what I've talked about numerous times on this network. Why did they let him play in the first place? Why was he on the Olympic team? I mean, we looked at it last year in the playoffs against the Knicks. The damn kid was on one leg.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this once? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Hour number 2. Welcome to it live right here on this Friday on the Early Line on SportsGrid. He is Donnie. I am Ben. A lot to get into here in this second hour. A ton of hoops focus, playing one of our favorite games by or sell. We'll have more NFL headlines from what has been a busy week ahead of the official start of the league year next week, in that legal tampering negotiating window opening up for free agency on Monday. Speaking of moves and maneuvers, it's trade deadline day in the NHL. Chris Meaney from the National Hockey League will join us a little bit later on in this second hour to talk all about that and the stretch run on the ice. A jam-packed second hour. It is the second hour here on this Friday on the Early Line.
Absolutely. Excited for this second hour right here. And by the way, free agency technically beginning on Monday where the tampering can start happening. You're going to see a flurry of deals come down this weekend from players already under contract with their team getting extensions and also shoring up that a guy doesn't reach free agency. The Buffalo Bills just signed Terrell Bernard, 4 years, $50 million contract with $25 million guaranteed. Get used to that because smart organizations understand, all right, free agency starts Monday. Let's wrap up all of our business internally so we know exactly what we're working with and not saying, hey, go test the waters in free agency. Oh, no, we didn't sign anybody because we waited on you to come back to us and you signed with somebody else. Now we're left out. Good organizations like the Buffalo Bills taking care of their players, wide receiver, now a linebacker. Let's see what they do entering into free agency. But get ready for a flurry of deals this weekend and a lot of money tossed around.
Took the words right out of my mouth. DRS, Terrell Bernard, a 4-year, $50 million deal, as DRS just said, to remain in Buffalo. Again, what good organizations do. They have foresight to extend and pay their players, rewarding them for success, but also helping out the finances with some flexibility for said franchise as well. We have seen a lot of those deals happen in the last 48, 72 hours. More over the weekend in free agency, although it's just the legal tampering window starting on Monday. Basically, that is the start for free agency, 4 p.m. Eastern time this upcoming Wednesday. League year officially begins. Those deals, trades, and signings can be made official. The Commanders yesterday re-signing Bobby Wagner, 1-year deal for the vet, guaranteed $8 million on the contract as well. a 10-time Pro Bowler, an 11-time All-Pro player, including a second-team nod this year. He remains in Washington. And, of course, some of the biggest news this week, DK Metcalf requesting a trade from Seattle. GM John Schneider of the Seahawks talking about it yesterday, saying, quote, obviously DK has requested a trade, and we are entertaining that. We are talking to a ton of teams, taking offers, seeing what that looks like. That's smart posturing around the NFL, to be very transparent about where this deal stands and trying to up all the assets necessary if a team wants DK Metcalf.
Exactly. Call around teams. Don't even wait for the calls to come to you. All you need is 2 to 3 teams to get into a bidding war, and you get exactly what you want. You move on. Wide receiver is happy, and you move forward from that. And also understand this. Sometimes you don't understand like what it means to an organization on the free agent market. If you are notorious at handling your own players, not in the best respects here, that goes a long way where if it comes down to 2 or 3 teams like, hey, the Bengals are offering you a lot of money, and your agent has to sit you down and go, understand if you take this Bengals money, that's all you're getting, and they will run you ragged and leave you hanging out to dry. Or, hey, choose Seattle. Hey, do you remember when DK went out and said, you know what? You've been a great player for us. We'll get compensation back. You'll move on and make more money. That goes a long way. That's a healthy organization saying, if you don't want to be here, let's get the right back. Because they're not going to fire you. Oh, you don't want to be here? 6th-round pick. Like, no, they're going to expect very good compensation back for DK Metcalf. But at the same time, they're not going to give him away. And also, other players see organizations that take care of their players.
For sure. And Donnie, part of the conversation, of course, for DK Metcalf is his contract. Signed an extension back in 2022 for now what feels like a discounted rate for any top-flight wide receiver at $24 million per year. The going rate in the last few off seasons for a wide receiver, $28 to $30 million at bare minimum, which, of course, is what Metcalf is hoping to make. He's only 27 years old. He spent all 6 years of his NFL career in Seattle. So, Donnie, when you think about where that stands then for the Seahawks, if they're going to allow this trade to be entertained, they also know whatever team is going to trade a first-rounder, a second and third-rounder for DK Metcalf, they are willing to give Metcalf said signed extension. And if that's not $30 million, then they can go to DK and be like, listen, this is what this team is willing to pay you. All of this stuff makes a ton of sense. It is sound negotiation, although Seattle is starting a new tenure. I guess not really. Mike McDonald's about to enter year number 2, but a new look to the offense with DK Metcalf more than likely on the move. Tyler Lockett released earlier this week. Jackson Smith and Jigba, really that top target now for Geno Smith.
Yeah, it's interesting, and we'll see how it plays out, but understand this. Like, yes, DK Metcalf isn't just asking for a trade because he just wants out of Seattle, which is part of it here. He wants out of Seattle because the new team he goes to will give him a new deal with the elevated salary market that they have. Maybe cooler heads prevail because, you know what? I like the direction of this franchise. They offer me a little bit more money, and I'm happy. That happens because we're going to talk about, too, like a Myles Garrett situation in Cleveland where who knows when 2 men get into a room and start talking and say to themselves, all right, you know what? I'm not happy here. You're not happy with us. How can we make it better? And after 30 minutes, 45 minutes, you know what?
Yeah.
I really don't want to leave. Can you promise me you're going to get like some wide receiver talent or some running back talent? Or how about give me another player at defensive tackle to help me? Give me a little bit more money. We can be happy. You never know what the response is going to be until you talk it out here. So for Jimmy Haslam, the owner of the Cleveland Browns, gone, hey, Myles Garrett wants to trade, wants to meet with you. Yeah, I'm good with that. Oh, that always gets off to a good start. And you want to spurn your most important player in your franchise who already has a ton of money in the bank who goes, I'll make it hurt for you guys. Let's see you in September when we're getting our heads busted out here and I'm sitting at home, how the fans feel about your organization. Nobody wants that.
And that's the report out of Cleveland early this Friday morning that Myles Garrett is prepared to sit out games if necessary. He wants to continue his Hall of Fame career somewhere else where he can actually compete for a Super Bowl. And the Browns are very far from doing that. But Jimmy Haslam is so mad at that idea. Reportedly, he won't even sit or speak with Myles Garrett. So you have one side, franchise ownership, front office aligned to the fact we're not even entertaining a Myles Garrett trade. Myles Garrett saying, I'm not playing for you. I'm not looking at a contract you present me, even if it's a ton of money. I'm not going to play for you this upcoming season. I'll sit out games.
Yeah.
That doesn't seem to be a very healthy environment, DRS. What?
Like even in real life, like the wife comes to me and is like, hey, you know what? We're getting a divorce. And like, we're not even talking about this. You know what's going to happen? We're going to get a divorce, and not by my choice at this point. But you know what? If the wife goes, she wants a divorce and we meet up, hey, maybe we can wine and dine and say, look, it's going to get better. I'll make sure I don't work at the SportsGrid network anymore. Whatever you need, honey, to make it work. See that? Maybe, you know what? Actually, I don't know if it's the issue because, I'm not sure. She knows I even have a job, but I sort of foiled that when I brought her to the office party. So it was like, oh, you actually do have a job. Or maybe I paid everybody to be there. She still doesn't know. Who knows?
And your wife, by the way, a lovely, lovely individual, despite all of this talk on the show. But, of course, she and the kiddo don't watch, so we can say whatever we feel like. But Donnie is correct, right? If the Cleveland Browns were doing this correctly, they would bump up the value for Myles Garrett, who is going to get a first-round pick in return, and try to do this ahead of the NFL draft in about 6 weeks' time. That would be the move because they already have the second overall pick. Let's make it a franchise-changing draft for Andrew Berry and that Browns front office. Feels like that might not be the case. Speaking of the draft DRS, the pick before Cleveland, number 1 overall, Cam Ward becoming the strongest favorite we have seen in this market really all off season, both at the end of the college football campaign and toward the tail end of the NFL year as well. Minus 320 for Ward to be that first overall pick.
By the way, hear me out on this, right? Like, we always advocate doing what's best for the franchise, which would be the SportsGrid network and how much we get paid and all that good stuff here. We're always worried about the paychecks, right? If we all put all our paychecks on minus 320 Cam Ward, we'd be better off for it. He's going number 1, Ben. Let's put the company money up for 1 month of total salary on Cam Ward. What do you say? What do you say,
I'm
man?
down. I'll do it. I'll join you. Come on. NBA news next.
It's made every match so much more enjoyable to watch because you don't get the stinkers, right?
Right. It goes back to these guys being smart. They figured out that if I've got the hammer in my back pocket and I don't relinquish it, we can just play them straight up and win. They figured that out. And so it's like, all right, now credit to the people at TGL. Like, no, we need to fix this because the hammer can change the match. And since we fixed it, you're not out of it.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
Off of the combine this weekend, there's been lots of anonymous sources and position coaches and all these things that sat down in interviews with him. A lot of teams allegedly don't see him as a first-round pick.
Their big mouth that thinks they can do it either. They're embarrassing themselves. They all think they're so smart, everybody in this business. You're all a bunch of drifts. Honestly, you don't know who's going anywhere.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Live right here on the early line on SportsGrid. It is a Friday, which means it's weekend vibes here on TEL, which means we play one of our favorite games. Buy or sell. First in the NBA, and then a college basketball edition of Buy or Sell. Joe Frizo, our producer extraordinaire, knows that it is the month of March. But first, we start with what has been a tumultuous week in Dallas for the Mavericks. You lose Kyrie Irving for the remainder of this season to a torn ACL. Ownership wants to up the prices for season tickets, and Dallas has to watch Luka Doncic go out there alongside LeBron James, basically score 30-plus each and every night, and lead L.A. to now the longest active win streak in the NBA's Western Conference, make it 8 straight. The blockbuster deal went down in the early morning hours of Sunday, February 2nd. So from February 2nd on, here is the outlook for Dallas and for LA. The Mavericks in 14 games are 6-8. Their championship price is now $650 to 1. Donnie, still with the idea that the Mavs were maybe in win now mode, a playoff contender with the addition of Anthony Davis alongside Kyrie Irving. That price, even after the deal, was around 40 to 1, not 650 to 1. Is that a misprint? Is there one more zero in there than necessary? Anyway, we'll get to it in just a moment. The Lakers in 14 games. I know, Joe, I'm kidding. The Lakers are 12-2 in the 14 games, winners of 8 in a row, and their price to win a Larry O'Brien trophy, looking more viable, continues to shrink by the day, is now 13 to 1. So that is the scenario of which we set up the buy or sell question. The Mavericks trading Luka Doncic is already the worst decision in NBA history.
You probably got to buy it. And let's go through this too, which I always get a laugh when I hear this. Like, how did the trade go down? Let's get behind the metrics here and what happened. And the Lakers like, boy, it was really important to make sure that we kept this on the down low and nobody knew about it. Because if anybody got wind and reported that a trade was on the table for Luka and Anthony Davis, they would have got run out of town in Dallas and never even had a chance to pull the trigger. So if you're the Lakers, you love the fact that nobody was actually able to get to the bottom of it before it actually happened. And let's understand this. We don't know how the scenario would have worked out if Anthony Davis was healthy. They're a much better basketball team. And Kyrie Irving doesn't go down, but they're all factors that play into it because the optics of the whole move here. Everybody in Dallas, let's just go from a Dallas fan perspective, was upset right away. You traded away our superstar. He's 25. Yeah, sometimes he's out of shape, but he still balls with the best of them. We're probably going to have him for at least 10 more years. It's at least something if I'm a season ticket holder or a Mavs fan. Every night I turn the television on, I get to watch Luka. I'm good with that. You trade him away and get Anthony Davis, who shows up right away. Is like, I'm about to have a 40, 40, and 40 night here right off the bat, which is the way he started his first game. Then gets injured right away. Oh, he'll be back in a little bit of time. They'll still be okay. Let's see what they can do for the playoffs. And then Kyrie Irving goes down. Literally, Luka goes to the Lakers, and now they're talking about them being championship contenders. And the Lakers, from a standpoint of, we just got a 25-year-old global superstar that when LeBron hangs it up whenever he does, we hand the torch right away over to him. What a sensation move for the Lakers and a damaging one for the Mavericks. And also, if we go like back in time, let's just say, like what would have been worse? Like when Kobe Bryant was like, I'm not playing for Charlotte. All right, forced his way out. That's one thing. Or Pau Gasol for a body, of $3 on 3 cents on the dollar goes out to L.A. Or Shaquille O'Neal, who says, you know what, I want to go to L.A. And they're like, you can't even afford him in the salary cap. And Mr. Stern goes, hey, you know what, let's change the whole salary cap just to make sure they get to L.A. Sounds like the Lakers are in on a lot of these bum deals out here in their favor here, Ben. How about that?
Remember the Chris Paul trade that wasn't when he was going to be part of the Big Four with Kobe, Powell, and Lamar Odom? And that trade was held up by the NBA league office? Yeah, it does sound like the Lakers involved. Listen, I'm sure there are some things that have happened that I am forgetting. My first thought was the Vlade Divac deal for Kobe Bryant, the rights traded from the Hornets to the LA Lakers. Who knows, right? Already the worst decision in NBA history. I think I would have to sell that keyword of already. I think it will go down as the worst decision in NBA history. Not only just this year seeing the immediate success for LA, but what Luka Doncic has done in his NBA career, did with Dallas, in what he looks to continue to do in Los Angeles. The way that he was described by Dallas always seemed asinine. Fat, out of shape, doesn't care, not really good at basketball. We're worried this is going to implode in 3 to 5 years. For the guy that single-handedly led the Mavericks to an NBA Finals appearance, for the guy that has the second highest scoring average in NBA postseason history, only behind MJ. That guy, Nico Harrison, was at the forefront of this. You want to know how you get rid of the curse? This is almost, you know what? No, I'm buying it. Already the worst decision in NBA history. You know why? Because we're getting to the point of like the curse of Luka Doncic, the curse of Nico Harrison, the curse of the hallway beer if you will, because this is borderlining on the curse of the Billy Goat, the curse of the Bambino type historically bad decisions in Major League Baseball history. So you know what? I'll buy it. Worst decision ever. And you know the only way to break out of this curse? The Adelson family, who is now the majority owner in Dallas, who has not ingratiated themselves by any means to this fan base, who I am sure had to sign off on what Nico Harrison presented them and had to be convinced that this was the right decision. But it's Nico Harrison and only Nico Harrison whose head needs to be on the stake for this decision. That's how you get rid of the curse when Nico Harrison is fired by the Mavericks.
And also understand this too, like the NBA is such a different entity from other professional sports leagues. Like in the NFL, hey, guy's 28 years old, his knee is bulky, it's ready to go. They go, we're not giving that guy a long-term contract. In the NBA, it's routine. So even if you thought that Luka was out of shape and it might not work out, hey, Joel Embiid has no legs and he got an extension here and he's in Philadelphia for 4 more years at this point. We've seen Kevin Durant blow his Achilles out, still flopping around in Oakland, and teams go, max contract for that guy. He's not even going to play next year. We don't care. So you can't line it up as, ooh, we're worried about what's coming up. No, the NBA does not care what comes down the road.
Yeah.
Superstars are everything in the arena, television-wise, ratings, and getting fans in the building. So none of it made some sense. If you thought like, well, hey, in 6 years, Luka's going to be out of the league. That's 6 years. What are you worried about?
An idiot can tell you the sky is green, and if they believe that, there's really no convincing them otherwise. That was kind of the thought process for Nico Harrison. This guy is fat and out of shape, and it's going to hurt him despite what we all had seen, which is Luka Doncic, one of the 3 best players in the NBA. Yeah, I'm in. Fire Nico. Fire Nico.
Philadelphia 76ers, they tried to play 2 different things. They tried to play contender, and they tried to play protect Joel Embiid. It wasn't doing Joel Embiid any good. And this goes back to what I've talked about numerous times on this network. Why did they let him play in the first place? Why was he on the Olympic team? I mean, we looked at it last year in the playoffs against the Knicks. The damn kid was on one leg.
Betting above the rim. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line. Only on SportsGrid.
This is how I know I have left a lasting impact on the SportsGrid network. We're doing buy or sell for college basketball here in the month of March. We continue playing buy or sell on this Friday with a conversation around the Big East winning head coach. That would be Rick Pitino Only in year number 2 in Queens, he has led St. John's to their first outright Big East title since 1985. 4 decades of work in only 2 years. And it's not just at St. John's, DRS. The illustrious career of Pitino on display. 880 wins. The only head coach in men's college basketball to lead 2 different programs to a national championship, Kentucky and Louisville. He has made 7 Final Four appearances. He is the first head coach in men's basketball D1 history to lead 3 different programs, Providence, Kentucky, and Louisville, to a Final Four berth. And he is soon to be the first and only head coach to lead 6 different programs to an NCAA tournament appearance. You add in Boston University and Iona as well, and soon to be, of course, St. John's. The Red Storm looking for their first NCAA tournament win since the year 2000. I'll just give the caveat to the buy or sell question with this. Naturally, at first, I looked at it and said, come on, like, what are we doing? Some recency bias. And then you start to dive in, and the question does have to be asked. Pound for pound, Rick Pitino is the best coach in college basketball history.
Yeah, we're selling that. We are. Rick Pitino's fantastic. And there are people on this network that thank him every day for rescuing a school called Iona that was down in the dumps for so long. Could not win anything, and he rescued them, and look how good they are. So there we go. We'll get that out of the way. But also, can we understand the fact is, yes, recency bias, which means the single best coach in the history of college athletics is Mike Krzyzewski, who won over 1,200 games, 100 tournament games, 13 Final Fours, and 5 championships here. That sounds like the pound-for-pound champion of all time here. And then you might even go like, hey, Donnie, what does your grandfather think about that? Well, doesn't he remember John Wooden was the greatest of all time? 10 NCAA championships. Come on now. I like Pitino. But are we really arguing he's pound for pound the best college coach of all time when there's Krzyzewski and Wooden still roaming out there saying,
Your grandfather. You have really great elderly people impersonations here on this show. Virginia McCaskey, may she rest in peace. As we look at Rick Pitino in the conversation for it, Donnie, you're right. When you look at some of the accolades of some of the pantheon of college hoops, it is hard to argue that Pitino does, in essence, stack up. 10 national championships for John Wooden. Mike Krzyzewski being the most successful head coach maybe in the recent era in college hoops. You look at guys like Dean Smith and Roy Williams, Bill Self even recently, Jay Wright, multiple national championship winners, even as of late, Dan Hurley, who has won back-to-back. But here is the argument for Pitino, in my estimation. Krzyzewski only did it at Duke. Roy Williams won at multiple places. Of course, didn't win national championships at multiple places, but had success in various stuffs. A lot of the guys we are mentioning did so in one program and only with one program. Does Rick Pitino take a little bit of a shot then in this conversation because he has been a coaching nomad? Perhaps. But I think when you can do it at a variety of places, when you can hit the ultimate ceiling in the sport at multiple spots, that almost speaks to your coaching acumen a little bit more than creating a culture, a program, and just continuing it for decade on decade. I'm going to sell it as well for this time on Rick Pitino. I do not think, though, at first blush, like I saw, it was the craziest question ever.
And by the way, I got a pound for pound. I'm seeing Pitino 6 foot, and I'm seeing Coach K 5'10". So what are we doing here as well? So Pitino's even got the body work going over him. Still, he's there. He's not the pound for pound at this point. But by the way, you're skipping here. You remember Coach K dominating with Army up there. Come on now. Multiple
He played at Army. He didn't
big
coach
time.
Army.
Yeah, he did coach at Army. Yeah, he did. Come on now.
Did he?
Yeah. Yeah. Look at that. Multiple institutions, Ben. Come on now. Let's go.
Did he win a national championship at Army?
I think they won a natty there. I think they won a natty. You know what I mean?
Oh, you do.
Or at least maybe the Commander's Cup. That's got to be worth more than a natty at that point to put up there. It's got to be one of those. Probably beaten Navy once in a while. Oh, that's big. That's big at Army. That's big. Positive record.
73 and 59, the record we were just given for Coach K's tenure with the Black Knights. Again, I don't think Rick Pitino is. I don't think it's the craziest question because of the success that he has had at multiple institutions. Speaking of Coach K and Dean Smith and Roy Williams, Duke UNC this weekend. Next.
off of the combine this weekend, there's been lots of anonymous sources and position coaches and all these things that sat down in interviews with him. A lot of teams allegedly don't see him as a first-round pick.
Their big mouth that thinks they can do it either. They're embarrassing themselves. They all think they're so smart, everybody in this business. You're all a bunch of drips. Honestly, you don't know who's going anywhere.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Possible that while every other state is trying to copy New York and get that 51% tax on sports betting, is it possible that New York will actually lower their taxes? That's surprising.
The question is, of course, well, what sports books could go there? I mean, we're already at 9 that are the biggest ones out there in the market. So, I mean, who are you really missing?
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Remember when everyone was upset about NIL? You know what NIL did? Make sure Cooper Flagg wasn't playing with the G League Ignite. That's good for us. That's good for college basketball. When the best players are actually playing college basketball.
You're going to get battle tested. And it doesn't matter, Kevin, if you're at home or on the road. If you don't come ready to play in the SEC, you're going home with an L.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. I want this to be the place that people come to. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than game time decisions. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on Sports.
Live right here on the early line on SportsGrid, a ton of college basketball for you. We have more mid-major tournaments starting on this Friday. We'll take a look at those in just a moment. And we also have some top teams in action at the mid-major level as well. But of course, it's the regular season finale weekend ahead at the high major level in college hoops, which means that old Tobacco Road rivalry. This one in Chapel Hill, and the stakes are paramount tomorrow night between Duke and North Carolina. UNC needs another quad one win. They only have one so far this season. Can they knock off Duke and maybe solidify a berth to the big dance? Because if not, it gets very dicey for Hubert Davis and the Heels to get into the NCAA tournament. For Duke, they need a win on the road inside the Dean Dome to clinch the number 1 overall seed in the ACC tournament and that regular season outright crown. So, Donnie, when you have all of that entering our 264th game between these in-state foes, for a long, long time, Duke and North Carolina has been billed as one of the great rivalries, not just in college sports, but all of sports. UNC leads the series with that slight edge. The first meeting on January 24th, 1920. But now we ask, is it the best rivalry in college sports? Buy or sell, DRS, Duke versus North Carolina is the best rivalry in college sports.
I got to buy here. I do. Now, understand this, too. Like, football usually means more. Michigan, Ohio State is massive. I mean, they, like, that week of the rivalry and the hatred between those two teams, that is something. And the same thing about the Iron Bowl down south. It's the carbon copy of here's the North battle that they hate each other, here's the Southern battle that they hate each other. In-state rivalry down there, and you take a look at Alabama and Auburn, so many national championships up in flames, so many chances to get, let's just say, playoffs. You got to win that, the kick six, memorable moments. I understand that, but for just pure fun, UNC and Duke, because it seems like every single year for at least my lifetime, let's just say the past 40 years, superstars on both sides of the equation. You have the state school versus the private school. You have Cameron Indoor, which, seats, 9,000 or 10,000. You have 22,000 in a modern arena over there at the Dean Smith Center in North Carolina. 8 miles apart. So it's not like, hey, opposite end of the state here. Like, you are literally a quick drive here. Battle lines are drawn in that state. And as much as I think football usually carries the day with most people in society, I got to tell you, This isn't a rivalry. Hey, they just got started in 1982. Every year it's so big.
Yeah.
And also the optics. Coach K, coaching his final season. Who's he get downplayed and knocked out by? North Carolina. Every single chance you have to get new blood in the rivalry, it just keeps working in that direction. So I'm going to have to say, Carolina Duke for me, growing up, probably the best rivalry I've watched in college throughout my lifetime, to be honest.
Listen, I'm going to sell it just because I am Big Ten Ben, and I still believe the game between Ohio State and Michigan is number one in college sports. But even Duke and North Carolina, which at times has lacked a little bit of luster in recent memory, still continues to deliver. Here's why I say in recent memory. North Carolina has won 6 of the last 10. Duke won the first one this year, 87-70, covering as a 13.5-point home favorite. But, Donnie, only twice in those last 10 meetings have both teams been ranked, both coming last year in top 10, top 15 tilts. So recent memory slightly skewed. But for most of my time growing up, your time growing up, this was a game and multiple games in a conference season that would decide regular season crown, tournament titles. Since the ACC was founded in 1953, 49 of the ACC titles decided by this game. That's nearly 78% of the ACC championships decided by the rivalry and that in-season matchup between the Blue Devils and the Heels. 15 of 16 ACC tournament titles, where the ACC tournament, unlike some leagues, carries a lot of weight. That tournament bigger for the ACC than it is for the Big Ten or the Big 12. 15 of 68 ACC tournament titles from 1996 through 2011 came down to this matchup. And that's a key for rivalries, in my opinion, as well. Not just history, not just longevity. Stakes. Are these two teams great? Are they at the top of their respective sport? Are they competing against each other at the highest level? And often Duke and North Carolina has been exactly that. I'm going to give the edge to Michigan, Ohio State. I think it's hard to argue against Duke and UNC.
No, it is. And that's the great part about it. Like, nobody's going to win this argument. And they're unbelievable rivalries. And also, like, saying, like, Duke and Carolina are so close together. And it's usually like, hey, the public school kids and the private school kids, that all adds up. But understand this, too. Like, even in the Iron Bowl, like, you see, like, the 30 for 30s on it, where how much it means. Like, if you lose that game, you got to sit around for the next 350 days or so and just stew over it and be embarrassed. And anybody that wears an Auburn or Alabama jersey, if they won that game, they have bragging rights. And it's the same thing about Michigan taking on Ohio State. Understand this year, you had the perfect dichotomy. You had Michigan beating Ohio State, but Ohio State winning a national championship. And the real argument was, but you didn't beat Michigan, so therefore you're null and void of your national championship because it's supposed to go hand in hand. Like, it's never happened before. Like, hey, the loser of that game moves on to the college football playoff and wins a national championship. And specifically the way Michigan was down this year and still won. Why? Because of how much that game actually means to those kids. Those guys can come in, one team 12-0, one team 0-12, and go, you know what? This is the biggest game, and you're going to get the most hard-fought game you can possibly have. So rivalries run deep. That's what makes college sports fantastic. And there are 3 rivalries we're talking about right now. Top level, pure hatred, and we love hatred in the sports business.
State lawmakers in Ohio were trying to introduce legislation to ban flag planting. That's how much this meant. Always
more
a great time.
More flag planting out there, people. Let's go. Come on.
I agree. What a week that was during rivalry week. Everybody was planting a flag. It was good times, led to a ton of brawls on the field. All right, more madness starting today on this Friday. 2 more conference tournaments at the mid-major level in action. Don't call it the Colonial. It's the Coastal Athletic Association, the CAA. UNC Wilmington, the favorite, plus 165. Some disrespect to the Towson Tigers and Pat Scarry. Plus 330 for Towson, who just won their first CAA regular season outright crown in school history. Second best number there. In Charleston, always a good team. Pat Kelsey, of course, now leading Louisville. Chris Mack at the helm there for Charleston.
You know what's interesting, too? You look and say, because we're analytical guys. We like to take a look at the numbers and see how they match up from side to side, right? UNC Wilmington, the best team in conference play with efficiency at a 116.1 rating, which is very good. You take a look at them shooting the three-point shot, number 1 in conference play. We understand that it holds up. Like, well, who plays good defense? And you have a difference of Campbell being the best team in conference play, Ben, at 100.6 is defensive efficiency.
Yeah.
And then you go all the way down to like the 6th spot, and it's only a 104. So for me, I look at it and say, okay, everybody probably plays decent defense, but not everybody is great on offense. I somehow do have an affinity always. If you have a team like UNC Wilmington and Towson, 1 and 2 in conference play, making the 3-point shot, I always lean that direction. Yes, I understand you need a really good defense to win, but I always put more flavor into the offense and the efficiency here. So UNC Wilmington and Towson, probably for me, 1 and 2 in the 3-point shot, 1 and 2 in efficiency there. Those are probably the 2 guys I'd look at here. And no surprise, 2 really good basketball teams.
Yeah, the Tigers 16-2. The Seahawks of UNC Dub are 14-4. They only met once in the regular season. In their first game in January, Towson went to UNC Wilmington, won in OT, 65-61. But it's pretty compact on the left side of that board in terms of the prices to win the CAA tournament title. How about the SoCon, the Southern Conference? Chattanooga, the Monks, trying to get back to the big dance at plus 220. Last year's conference title winner in Samford at plus 410, who put a scare, if you remember, into Kansas in that opening round. And the Furman team that upset Virginia a couple of years ago, a 7-1 price. A lot of short numbers, DRS, in SoCon action.
Yeah, you take a look at Chattanooga. Like, if you're talking about a team that you don't watch all that much and you like to bet because it's a fun style of pace, how about a fantastic offense at a 120.6 offensive rating? And then you take a look at their defense, which isn't that good. They shoot the lights out, Ben. 40% from three-point range in conference play, but then give up about, 37% from the three-point line. That's a fun team to bet right there.
Yes, it certainly is. Chattanooga, UNC Greensboro, the 2 top teams in the bracket. They'll start their action later this weekend. NHL trade deadline day next.
Which is a great place to be. Are you in the locker room? Like, you giving like the Any Given Sunday Inches Al Pacino speech? Are we there yet?
Oh yeah, I think we've been there. We're gonna have a long talk with Rob today about the 99-199 issue from last week. Like, I just don't get how he is still employed. We gotta talk to ownership about that one.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Possible that while every other state is trying to copy New York and get that 51% tax on sports betting, is it possible that New York will actually lower their taxes? That's surprising.
The question is, of course, what sports books could go there. I mean, we're already at 9 that are the biggest ones out there in the market. So, I mean, who are you really missing?
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Remember when everyone was upset about NIL? You know what NIL did? Make sure Cooper Flag wasn't playing with the G League Ignite. That's good for us. That's good for college basketball. When the best players are actually playing college basketball.
You're going to get battle tested. And it doesn't matter, Kevin, if you're at home or on the road. If you don't come ready to play in the SEC, you're going home with an L.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching!
Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Road management is a dirty word.
Let him rip. You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It is trade deadline day around the National Hockey League, where we see a flurry of moves ahead of 3 p.m. Eastern. That's what NHL's Chris Meaney is here to tell us on the early line on this Friday. Chris, we appreciate you taking some time on what I am sure is a busy day for you on trade deadline day in what has already been a rather active deadline week around the NHL. Everybody trying to bolster up the roster to make that run here to end out the regular season and, of course, to the Stanley Cup playoffs. Chris, as always, thanks for being here on TEL.
Yeah, happy Friday, guys. It is an exciting time, certainly, to be, a sports fan in general. Everything is always happening in March, but with the NHL trade deadline today at 3 Eastern, we'll be busy over at NHL Fantasy, and we'll be tracking a lot of these moves. And we've seen a lot, as you mentioned, over the past couple of days and really over the past few weeks. We've seen a handful of trades, so it should be really, really exciting moving forward here.
A lot leads up to that deadline, including earlier this week, Chris, when you look at the big deal for the Colorado Avalanche, acquiring Brock Nelson from the Islanders. What stands out to you most about that deal with Brock Nelson now heading to the Avs?
This is an amazing deal for Colorado. This is something that they really needed down the middle of the ice. Of course, we all know that Nathan McKinnon is a stud, but you go back and look at the last time the Avalanche won the Stanley Cup, they had a solid number 2 in Nazem Kadri, and they lost him through free agency after they won the cup, and they've been starving for somebody who could be on that second line. And Brock Nelson, this is a 9-time 20-goal scorer, 9 of his 12 years. He's hit the 20 mark, 18-plus goals in 11 of his 12 seasons, 30-plus over his past 3, averaging 36 per over that span. And just since the start of 2021, he's top 25 in goals. So you look at some of the edge stats, he brings a lot of speed to an already fast Colorado team with McKinnon and Cale Makar, and you got Duran and Nichushkin back in the lineup as well. It moves Casey Middlestat to the third line, so it gives him a lot of balance. Middlestat's a nice player, but he's not a top 6 player. So it gives Colorado a lot of balance. And moving on from Mikko Rantanen, that surprised a lot of people, but even the organization said, it's nice to have Mikko Rantanen. Kind of felt like they were a one-line team, a lot of, top-heavy guys. But now moving on from Rantanen, getting Martin Necas from Carolina, he's been fantastic alongside Nathan McKinnon, also brings a lot of speed to the Avs, and now Brock Nelson. So you're essentially moving off from Mikko Rantanen, and then you fill some holes with those 2 players as well. So Colorado loved this move by them, and they're certainly worthy of being, cup contenders. Other moves that you see there, Jake Wallman, another great ad by the Oilers. They've lost 6 of their past 8. They need help on the blue line. They've allowed the second most goals since the Four Nations face-off. We know what they have to offer in Draisaitl and McDavid. They went to the Stanley Cup final last year and lost by a goal. So Jake Wallman is a really terrific ad and just shores up what they needed, and that's some help on the blue line.
What we love about obviously being on a trade day here for us, Chris, is the fact that, pressure burst pipes here. You got to get these deals done by 3 o'clock. If we're looking at major moves that could come down today or expectations, give us some looks out there who big superstar names that you're hearing might be on the block and could be moved today.
Well, it's funny, like Mikko Rantanen again, right? Carolina goes all in. This is a team that they haven't been super aggressive over the past few years. Last year, they acquired Jake Gensel, didn't work out. They weren't able to retain him, and they lost him. Then they go out and get a guy like Mikko Rantanen on an expiring contract again. Some reports that they can't, extend him. So Carolina's thinking, listen, if we can't extend him, we don't want to lose him for nothing. Let's try to get something. So there were some reports last night that he was traded to the Dallas Stars. That deal, reportedly fell through. So we'll keep an eye on that move moving forward. Well, Carolina, for me, I think this is a team that should go all in, maybe be aggressive and grab somebody else. But Mikko Rantanen is going to steal all the headlines if he is traded. He's won a cup. He's one of the best players in the NHL. Some other players to keep an eye on, not to the same kind of level as Mikko Rantanen, but Brock Besser, right? The Canucks they moved on from JT Miller. They're struggling to pick up wins. I know they're hanging around in a playoff spot at the moment, but Brock Besser's on the final year of his deal, and he's a guy that can help. He can, for example, Florida, he would fit in perfectly inside the top 6 with the Panthers. Other lesser names like Ryan Donato for the Chicago Blackhawks, Jason Zucker for the Buffalo Sabres. We know that those 2 teams are selling. I'm not sure what the Penguins are going to do. They've made a couple moves here and there over the past couple of weeks, but Erik Karlsson is still a stud. We saw him, he was fantastic for Sweden in the Four Nations face-off, and Rickard Rakell on the Penguins as well. Those are 2 players that they still have term left on their deal, but the Penguins could certainly move off from either one of those guys, and they would be really good ads. But all eyes are on Mikko Rantanen, guys. And, if he goes to the Dallas Stars, they're already loaded right now. But if he goes to the Stars, they would be clear-cut favorites in the NHL, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Chris, this pretty late, the trade deadline in the regular season, so trying to build up that team to make a Stanley Cup run. You talked about some teams and some players that might make a move. Let's look at those Stanley Cup odds here in the stretch run of this regular season on deadline day. Are any of these prices for any of these teams going to shift a ton in the next 5 hours or so?
Well, you could maybe look at the Golden Knights as a buying window right now. They picked up Riley Smith, who won a cup for them, a couple years ago, and Vegas is stacked on the blue line, and they'll probably add. I mean, they've been adding over the past couple of years. It's all they do. They don't care about first round picks. It's like the Rams, right? They don't care at all. Like, give me all the assets. We're win now mode. So that number could move a little bit shorter. I look at the Tampa Bay Lightning. I still think that that's a buying window for them. They picked up Yanni Gourde, who won a couple cups with them a couple years ago, and Oliver Bjorkstrand as well. They've been one of the hottest teams in the NHL. I don't think they'll do anything else, but I think that's a strong number at 12-1. I don't believe that the Stars will move all that much, even if they get Mikko Rantanen. It could move from 7 to 6 or 5 in certain spots, but I really like them overall as a squad. I've liked them over the past couple of years. They've been to the Western Conference Finals in the past 2 seasons, and you look at mid-November, they're the best team in the league. And since the calendar has turned to 2025, they lead the NHL in all categories, wins and regulation wins and goals. They have the best penalty kill in the league. They have the best power play in the league over the past 6 weeks as well. They're loaded up and down their lineup. They've already made a couple moves. Mikael Granlund a couple weeks ago, a lot of versatility. He can move up and down the lineup, third line, first, second, fourth, kill penalties for you, play on the power play, and they're loaded on the blue line, and Jake Ottinger is solid between the pipes. So they are by far my favorite. I don't even think they need Mikko Rantanen, but if they go and get Mikko, that'll be everything for them. So I look at that board. I don't think we'll see too much movement. Maybe the Maple Leafs, get in on the fun, seeing that Florida and Tampa's made some moves in the Atlantic Division, and that number could move to 15. But I really think a buying window potentially on the Golden Knights and the Lightning at the moment.
Pretty compact on the left side of those Stanley Cup odds. 5 teams, the 5 best prices, all separated by just $1. Chris Meaney joins us to break down the action tonight in the NHL next.
Which is a great place to be. Are you in the locker room? Like, you giving like the Any Given Sunday Inches Al Pacino speech? Are we there yet?
Oh yeah, I think we've been there. We're gonna have a long talk with Rob today about the 99-199 issue from last week. Like, I just don't get how he is still employed. We gotta talk to ownership about that one.
The Smiley Show, only on SportsGrid.
Possible that while every other state is trying to copy New York and get that 51% tax on sports betting, is it possible that New York will actually lower their taxes? That's surprising.
The question is, of course, what sports books could go there. I mean, we're already at 9 that are the biggest ones out there in the market. So, I mean, who are you really missing?
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Remember when everyone was upset about NIL? You know what NIL did? Make sure Cooper Flag wasn't playing with the G League Ignite. That's good for us. That's good for college basketball. When the best players are actually playing college basketball.
You're going to get battle tested. And it doesn't matter, Kevin, if you're at home or on the road. If you don't come ready to play in the SEC, you're going home with an L.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
The 2 guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity.
I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What? How do you do this one? Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Trade deadline day in the NHL and also 6 games on the ice tonight. We are in the stretch run of the regular season around the National Hockey League. So the NHL's Chris Meaney here for a second consecutive segment on deadline day after the moves are done at 3 p.m. Eastern time. Roster solidified for that chase of the Stanley Cup. So, Chris, let's look at those 6 games tonight in the top team in the National Hockey League at this moment. Out in the Western Conference, the Winnipeg Jets, 90 points, the most around the NHL, taking on the Devils tonight in New Jersey. Let's start with that top game. How do you break it down?
Yeah, I really like the Jets. I know they played last night, but Connor Hellebuck will get the start tonight. And I look at this Devils team, and unfortunately, they lost their best player in Jack Hughes for the rest of the season. They're without their best defenseman in Dougie Hamilton, who's considered week to week. They return home after, a lengthy road trip, a 6-game West Coast road trip. Typically like to fade these teams. Their first game at home. They lost in Colorado, in Vegas, and in Dallas. They've lost 4 of 6. They've only scored, they scored 2 or fewer rather in 3 of those games. So without some of their big boys, especially on the power play, I really like the Jets here. And they've just been dominant. I look at Velarde to pick up a point, 3 assists last night, 9 points in his past 8. He's got 58 points in 63 games. So I think the Jets continue to roll here tonight.
Yeah, the Jets, who actually lost to the Philadelphia Flyers at home, pasted the Philadelphia Flyers last night. So that back-to-back here, staying in the tri-state area. If we do look at the Washington Capitals, the beasts of the East right now, they're a heavy favorite tonight, taking on the Detroit Red Wings. But at the same time, the question's not so much about will Washington win. They're a heavy favorite. Will we get an Ovechkin goal tonight, Chris, as well, along with the W?
I sure hope so, right? I think he's got 3 in his last 5. He's scoring at an unbelievable pace. Like, his 18% shooting rate is the highest mark of his career. Like, this is the best pace, and at his age, it's certainly remarkable. And the shot attempts, there was a 2-game stretch, guys, where he had 28 shot attempts. That is just absolutely ludicrous. So he's firing the puck. You take a look at his shot prop, 4+ in 7 of his past 8 games. But I do like the Capitals. They went through a little bit of a lull. It was their first 3-game losing streak. They got back-to-back wins here now. They've been a dominant team at home ice. Maybe look to take them in regulation, get a little bit of a better number there. And, I was talking about the Devils kind of sliding and the Red Wings as well. 4 straight losses, 6 of 8. They've allowed 4+ goals in 7 of their past 9. They have the worst penalty kill percentage in the league, and we know what the Capitals have to offer with Ovechkin on the power play, and Jacob Chikrin's been a nice add as well. In fact, the Devils' historic bad PK are the 5th worst if the season ended today of all time in the NHL. So I do like the Jets, I'd like the Jets rather, and I also like the Capitals. And another, play on that board, I really like the Vegas Golden Knights, and I think a team that's struggling, the Pittsburgh Penguins, you could take a look at the Golden Knights in the puck line, get a little bit of value there on home ice plus money. They've won 6 of 7. They've scored 14 goals over the last 3. And this Penguins team, we talked about them in the previous segment. Will they move off of Erik Karlsson or Rickard Rakell? They have just extremely struggled. Since the Four Nations break, 5.14 goals allowed per game. That's the highest mark in the league by far. The second most in the NHL all season long at 3.63. 5th most shots allowed, 4+ goals allowed, guys, in 6 of their past 7. So they can't keep the puck out of their net. And Vegas is rolling. Look for Jack Eichel to get a couple points as a prop.
Total for that one in Sin City, 6.5 tonight between the Golden Knights and the Pens. Alexander Ovechkin, 6 goals in the 7 games he has played since the NHL returned from the Four Nations face-off. Now minus 220 to break the Great Ones record in Wayne Gretzky to score goal number 895 in his career during a point of this regular season. And Chris, back to the Stanley Cup odds. The Caps, most points in the Eastern Conference, 88. The Jets, most points out west and in the NHL as a whole at 90. And still not one of those 5 best prices. 11-1 on Washington, 15-1 on Winnipeg. Chris, in the final minute of this segment, do you perhaps have more belief in the Jets or the Capitals than the odds makers right now for their postseason outlook?
Yeah, it's crazy that neither team really getting love, starting to just a little bit. I have more faith in Washington because of the path. I think the path is a little bit clearer in the East. The Western Conference is going to be an absolute bloodbath. But you look at some of the teams there don't really believe in the Carolina Hurricanes with Mikko Rantanen, without Mikko Rantanen. They haven't been able to get it done in the playoffs, and Maple Leafs haven't been able to get it done in the playoffs. So look at the 2 teams, in Florida and Tampa Bay. Those are some teams, combined. They've been to the Stanley Cup over the last 5 years. But this Washington team already made the moves in the offseason. Logan Thompson having a Vezina candidate season. Pierre-Luc Dubois picked him up, having a great season. Matchup Jacob Chikrin among the leaders on the blue line in goals. So I don't think that they'll add. You'll probably get the same sort of number, but this is a team that has Stanley Cup experience on the squad. So, a pretty clear path in the East. It's very top heavy. So if you're looking for somebody to back, Capital's been strong all year.
Chris Meaney, we appreciate the time as always. Thank you. Enjoy Deadline Day. Hour number 3 up next.